Welcome to Life by Design, episode 94. Welcome to Life by Design. I'm your host, Dr. Jamie Richards, and I'm joined today by my colleague, Dr. Horatio Jug.
Nice to be talking to somebody this week.
Yeah, that seems to happen from time to time. Things are crazy.
It's busy, man.
On the storm episode a few weeks ago that we covered. But yeah, it's nice to be back and settled in, and nice to have you back on the show. And I know today's episode, the purpose of education, is something you particularly are passionate about. We've had many conversations off the air, full of ranting and raving, and so we've refined that so we can have a conversation today that, as you alluded to, needs to be helpful for the people who are listening in. And that's the point. This is not to point fingers. This is not to make somebody else wrong. It's simply to bring up a point and see if we can't be helpful to some of the parents that are listening in, especially parents who are leaning towards some of the Think by Design principles. And for the ones who aren't, hopefully we can open you up to that. So, Horatio, why don't you start off with a story? You had almost a shocking story, regardless of your positions and your political, your political position. It's just, I think it was an inappropriate approach in a school that a friend of yours had experienced.
Yeah. So again, thank you for the pre-frame. I'm going to probably reintroduce this pre-frame a couple of times. I don't care about the politics being taught in this story. It's a really political story, and I'll explain why as I go along. So my friend's daughter, they live in Toronto. I think she's in either grade 2 or 3 or something along that age, just a couple of years older than Ari and Andy. And what they were teaching them in school is how, the white man stole the Indians' land. And one of the games that they played was something about one of the kids has a chair, and then somebody else, takes the chair away from them so they can see what it feels like to have something stolen from them. Now, again, politics aside, the issue with this is you're teaching a child in grade 2 about politics, right? You're context dropping, which means that, let's use math, because math is really simple to understand. You would never teach a child in grade 2 calculus or algebra simply because they don't have the mental development yet to handle such abstract concepts like calculus or algebra. They're learning numbers and maybe some simple addition by that age. And when it comes to something as complicated as politics, right, let's keep in mind when we're talking about, the stages of philosophy, right, like the different levels, politics is the last stage. It's the highest one. It's the most abstract. To get to politics, you have to go through metaphysics, epistemology, ethics, and then politics, right? So you're telling a child that something is wrong without them even understanding all of the situations, the stories, the context around it. So they're developing an opinion without understanding the reasons why, that's horrible education, right?
You had said in this case, the daughter actually came home thinking that her dad had stolen the land from the Indians.
Well, yeah, thank you. I was getting there. The point of that, and the reason that's what she took away was because she was lacking all of the steps to get to that point. There's no way that a child at that age could understand something so complicated as property rights and history and what happened between the First Nations people and the European settlers when they came over. That is far, beyond what a child of that age should be able to understand. So and when you teach a child stuff like that, they won't get the lesson. They won't understand the point. They won't even be able to have an intelligent conversation around whether they agree or disagree at this point. They'll just take it wholesale and kind of go with it. It's like a float, it's really damaging to the child's mind.
So what's the result then in your mind with an education process that teaches things that are out of context, not necessarily in the order of, building blocks, ABC, starting with abstract thoughts versus concrete thoughts and concepts? What's the long-term potential detriment to doing it that way?
Look around you. The number one killer is suicide of our youth. We have more depression today than we ever have before. We have more anxiety today than we ever have before. We have 80% of Americans, this is a study in Forbes, published that they hate their jobs. They're not happy. They don't understand the world. They think the world is unknowable. They're turning to all sorts of of recreational drugs. They're trying to destroy their minds. That's not all of it. It's not cause and effect, but that's definitely part of it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and so what you're saying, you make the point really clear, is the problem at the heart of this is teaching children that the universe or their environment is unknowable, that it's unstable, that, they have no control. And so, of course, it leaves them in a state of chaos, in a state of uncertainty. And this is a great example of that.
So, yeah, we have to go back. In order to understand the education process, right, you have to understand, first of all, human nature. Like, we need our minds. We need knowledge. Like, humans aren't strong. We're not the fastest race. Like, if it was just up to physicality, the animals would dominate us. Like, they're way more physical. They're better. However, we need our brains, right? The fact that we can look at the world and we can think abstract thoughts and we can take pieces and enrage our environment and build homes and build society, that's our strength. In order for us to do that, we need knowledge. Right? And in order for us to pass knowledge through generations, that's the purpose of education. Now, again, much like everything else in life, it comes down to a certain philosophy. And the majority of education being taught today comes down to the philosophy of John Dewey, right, who was an 1800s philosopher. And his goal through education was to create a skeptical mind, right? Not skeptical in the sense that I'm going to ask certain questions to come to a solution, but a skeptic in the sense that there is no truth, there is no answers, I'm constantly questioning. So if that's your purpose, that's going to create a certain type of education versus somebody like Maria Montessori wanted to create an adult who had high self-esteem, who was certain that they could meet the challenges and demands of life, and who thought that the universe and the planet was a knowable, reliable place. Right? So before we start talking about, where should I put my child and what type of education should I give them and what's the best for them, you really need to ask yourself, well, what type of child am I trying to create? Right? Am I trying to create somebody who's skeptical? Which is fine. If that's your goal, listen, I'm not judging you. I'm just telling you that this is the way that things work. Versus, am I trying to create somebody who is competent, comfortable, high self-esteem, high functioning, and can take on the challenges of the world?
You got to say number two. I think that is the number one thing I think about most with our kids is, teaching them to be able to adapt to a world, to give them the tools and develop their own internal fortitude in order to be able to handle what happens around them versus to feel like, the world is going to crush them and that they're going to need things from outside of themselves in order to adapt and live successfully in the world.
Right. So how do we do that? Right. So how do we do that? And again, the answer to those questions, it's far more complicated than I understand, but I can give you like the general principles based on all the like the studying and all the reading that I've been doing. So if you have a really young child, right, the most important thing for them to know and to understand is that the world around them is stable, that the world around them is safe, that the world around them follows certain rules, right? So if you were to look at, the education that Ari is going through. And I have no problem talking about Ari. The reason that we chose Montessori for Ari is that exact reason. His nature, the way that he was since the day that he was born, he's a really anxious child. So we really need to make sure that we're doing everything we can to not tell him, right? Not with words. Because children don't understand words. Words are very abstract. They understand some words, right? Like the basics of like, this is white and that's a car, but they don't understand abstract like security and anxiety. So you have to put them in an environment where things are stable and are secure, right? Like in Montessori, for example, every single day between 9 and 10, it's the same thing. It's work time. Every single day between 10 and 11, it's the same thing. Every time you take something off the shelf, you put it back. Right? Every time you need to ask a question, there's a certain hierarchy in which you ask the question. You ask the intermediate student, then you ask the senior student, then you ask the teacher, right? And even the lessons and the things that they're introduced with and to are very, follow a certain hierarchy. They are the way that they are so the child can grasp the lesson, which is that things are certain and knowable. Now, when he comes home, the environment at home is the same. Right? There's timing for everything. There's certain things that we do. There's certain ways that we are. Everything's framed in the positive. Right? It's never your child's bad. It's your child is this way. It's never he doesn't do this. It's never on the negative. It's always on the positive. So we're trying to create this environment in which we're raising the child to inherently understand these things through their experience, right? It's the same thing with an adult. That saying, you are the top 5 people that you spend most of your time with. Well, your child, if you put them in a good, loving, nurturing environment that's solid and consistent, of course they're going to, have a better chance at grasping that the world is knowable, right? Versus the environment that some poor kids are put into, right? They have different teachers every year, then the teachers switch over, and then this teacher wants to do it this way, and then this teacher wants to do it that way, and they change something, and then there's budget cuts, and they get home and their parents aren't consistent. Like it's unbelievable. It's actually unbelievable that some children can survive some of the emotional and mental shock that they go through growing up in life.
Yeah, I think something, Andy was in Montessori for a period of time, and we've, always been attracted to the Montessori philosophy. We didn't continue in that program for reasons that had nothing to do with the actual Montessori philosophy, more to do specifically with the location. But, along those lines, something we've really been working on, and you essentially said that, is really trying to name Andy's strengths. And for Scotty, too, as she starts to get a little bit older, you talk about positioning things and framing them in the positive. And I love this idea of naming strengths. It's been really helpful. So if Andy picks something up, it's not thanks for picking that up, Andy. It's Andy, you're a very helpful person. Or if Andy, does something like, answers a question that's really difficult, Andy, you're a very intelligent person. And so naming those strengths helps her identify herself as that type of person. And it's such a great strategy to help her develop her self-esteem versus not making it specific and tangible, which we've talked about in the past, where you're kind of saying, oh, good girl, bad girl, versus, you're this. This is your character trait. You're exhibiting it right now. And I tell you, when you say it to her, it's amazing how you can see her face light up, when she identifies herself as that kind of person. And, in terms of reprimanding, it's really actually allowed us to use that in reverse. Andy, is this action the kind of thing that a kind person would do? Do you think this is a thing that a kind person would do? And she's like, no. And so she's starting to understand that certain actions are expressions of character traits, and she's getting the ability to decide who she wants to be as a person. And I just tell you, I've been amazed at that part of what we've been doing and how well it's actually worked.
Yeah, I mean, just to frame it up right for everybody listening here, I am there's lots of days where I go to bed. There's actually more days than I would like to admit that I go to bed and I'm like, wow, today was not my proudest parenting moment.
Sure.
I'm not saying, right, let's be clear with this. I'm not saying that my kids, are perfect or they don't act like animals. They do. They really do. I am far from perfect. I'm tired. I'm run down. I don't want to deal with it. I have all those same emotions. I'm just asking you to have a clear plan of what it is that you want. And just like everything else, just try your best to action that out to the best of your ability, to the best of what you can do. Because, and again, going back to this idea of education, this is really interesting to me. Everyone, we're putting university on a pedestal. Well, universities are somewhere where you go and you should be something after you graduate university.
Right.
And for me, that's just backwards. For me, the time to invest in education is now when they're young. Mm-hmm. Because if they can be confident, if they can know that the world is knowable, if they can have esteem and confidence in themselves, there's nothing that they won't be able to do.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter later, right? They can pay for their own university; they'll figure it out. But now is the time, right? Yeah. There's a saying in Croatian that the tree is formed when it's young, mm-hmm. and the same thing is true with the child.
Right. Yeah, no, it makes 100% sense. As the twig is bent, so grows the tree. Is the same.
That's it.
Same type of concept, and I agree 100% that it's who they are long before they get to university that's going to determine their success. It's not university that's going to make the person. And so I think we're on the same page here, Cratio, and obviously there's lots of discussion about the pursuit of education, but simply today's episode is to be helpful and get you to think about what your plan of action is, and if the steps you're taking, the places your kids are getting educated, whether it be in the public system, Montessori, or at home, And I think regardless, there's always going to be at-home education, and that's an important part. But just be clear on what it is, because here's the deal. And, you know, Joel told us this a long time ago, and when he first said it, when Joel had kids, you're like, oh, Joel, I can't believe you would say that. He said, you know what? Kids are a-holes.
They can be, yeah.
You know, and it's like, that's not very nice. And then you have kids, and you go, oh, my God. You know, I love my kids to death, but sometimes they can be, you know, a-holes. And, and that's just the way it is. It doesn't make me love them any less, but, you know, you have to understand that that's part of the development process, and obviously giving them love and support and having a clear action plan as to what you're trying to create. That's a great way to tackle it versus, you know, coming at it from a different perspective and some of the ones we talked about today. So guys, as always, lots of great stuff on these episodes. So check them out. Thank you so much for joining us. 1 million families worldwide living life by design.